Now that we have that information, let's move into some best practices when it comes to CHW training. So, to ensure that CHWs are well equipped to serve their communities, we must implement best practices in training that are engaging, effective, and that are aligned with the adult learning principles. So, adult learning principles, CHWs, like many adult learners, we benefit the most from training that is relevant, that is practical, that is participatory. Traditional lecture style training, it can be ineffective. So it's important to incorporate real world applications into the learning process. So one of the most effective ways to do this is through experiential learning. This involves hands-on experiences or hands-on exercises, field work, shadowing experiences. Um, by immersing CHWs in real-world scenarios, we help them to develop practical skills that they can immediately apply in real-world settings. And so another key strategy is role-playing and simulations. So for example, practicing a home visit or conducting health education sessions in a controlled training environment will then help CHWs to build confidence before they actually have to work in the field and go into someone's home and conduct that type of exercise. So we also emphasize the power of case studies and storytelling. CHWs learn best when training materials reflect real life situations that they may encounter. So by presenting case studies that illustrate community challenges and solutions, we help the trainees to connect with their work on a deeper level. And finally, assessments and evaluations are critical to measure the CHW's competency. So, to ensure that the training is effective, we must regularly assess knowledge retention, skill proficiency. We can do this through quizzes, competency tests, and practical demonstrations. And so, by implementing these best practices, we can enhance CHW education. We can overall boost retention and ultimately improve community health outcomes because that is the goal.
Yes, yes.
So,
I want to interject here, if that's okay, JR.
yeah.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that, well, let me just pose this as a question, and if somebody wants to actually come off of mute, just raise your hand, we'll let you speak. But JR mentioned real world exercises or real world activities when we talked about experiential learning, or even when it comes to like role playing and simulations. And I love to know, what are you all doing for real world activities as it relates to training your CHWs? For those of you that are training, and if you have no idea what that looks like, then I'd like to take a pause here and kind of talk about how we do that at Umemba Health. So let me open up the chat and see if there's any comments. But let's talk a little bit about real world learning and real world training. I think this is one of the biggest things that I have found has been different in training community health workers as opposed to training other types of adult learners. And maybe this is something I brought from my nursing background, because we had to do hours of internships and hours of, even as a medical assistant, we started off giving injections on an orange, and then we went to giving ourselves saline injections, right? And then you go to the hospital and do your internship and get your experience there. All right, so Dr. Silva says case studies, role playing scenarios. Absolutely. Tiffany says public health literacy, i.e., assisting with medical terminology and information dissemination. Okay. Andrea says, I agree that the training is different. The certification makes it different with the baseline of knowledge in most cases. Absolutely. Absolutely. So all of those are good examples. I'll say one of the things that we do is, and JR talked about this earlier when we talked about the way we provide competency-based learning. If we have a particular class, and right now our course is 100% self-paced on demand unless a cohort organization wants us to do a live course. But what we will do is whatever we learn in class that day, we actually assign what we call real world homework, where they have to go and immediately put into practice what they have learned during class, that session, and then they come back to class and talk about it, or they write it up in a written response and share it. So I'll just say one of the simplest things, I think this is the week one homework. Well, week two, because week zero, we have them fill out forms and stuff. Week two homework is, you're learning all about CHW. I think our course is Introduction to CHW Profession, and we talk about professional skills and conduct. And you have to now go out in the community and you have to explain what a CHW is and what a CHW does to 3 people that have not heard of it. It could be friend, it could be family member, it could be, colleague, it could be someone at the church, but we want them to get used to having to explain what a community health worker is, how community health workers can serve, why would they need a community health worker, the extension that they provide to the healthcare services. So that's the first lesson. And every lesson, when we provide these trainings, we have them doing something immediately in the real world that reinforces what they just learned in the class. So that's what we call real world assignments or real world exercises. John Silva said, very spirited discussion this week when we allowed space for current events. Yes, we have done that as well and allowed space for current events. And this would be a very, very interesting time, considering everything that's going on. So I can just imagine. All right. Well, I just wanted to stop there and make sure that everybody knew what we meant when we said real world, because that is really one of the different ways that you've got to train a community health worker. And I know many programs don't offer that. All right. Any other questions before we go on and just show you a couple of different ways that we provide these best practices that JR has just talked about? Oh, I missed a comment. Tamika said Baylor Scott and White Health has partnered with Uplift so they can have an entire program dedicated to students. I don't know what Uplift is. Can you provide a little bit more information about that in the chat, Tamika? I want to say it's maybe some type of field experience site where they can get experience, but I'm not for sure. So let us know in the chat. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. If any resources that you all have for training CHWs, please share those in the chat as well. All right.
Awesome.
Thank you, ma'am.
Is Tamika in Dallas?
She is.
Okay, so she might be speaking about Uplift, which is a charter school program. So it sounds like they might be going in there and working with some of the students that way, maybe with some CHWs, which would be absolutely amazing.
She said
That's great.
great.
Awesome. Love that. Love that.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you. Keep it coming, y'all. If y'all have other comments or questions in the chat, we want this to be engaging. So thank you for taking that pause, Quisha. So just to show kind of a visual of an example of how we utilize scenarios in our training. So this one is balancing commitments, right? The CHW's role in office and field work. So in a scenario like this, we have the supervisor is kind of in between his boss and the CHW he supports. And boss of supervisor is not pleased that this person doesn't see our CHW in all the meetings. They're not as actively participating in everything that this supervisor's boss expects every staff employee to be a part of. And the supervisor is conveying this message to the CHW, like, well, here's the new expectation. You need to be in all assigned meetings. My supervisor is not happy about this. And our poor little CHW over here is like, well, wait, I do my best work in the community, right? I need to be in this field. When you don't see me, it is because I'm providing valuable services. And, if I'm here, I can't be there. And so it's all about how we balance those commitments, how we communicate our roles and what we're doing, and how maybe we need some buy-in here, maybe from our supervisor to share with their supervisor who may not understand the CHW's importance and role in the in that space. And so maybe to understand that our CHWs, a lot of the work they do might be outreach, right? And so that means that a great deal of the majority of their time is going to be in a field and not necessarily in an office setting or whatever the case may be. But yeah, balancing those commitments, balancing where there might be some struggle between people understanding their role and what that commitment looks like for a CHW. And so this was just one fun scenario. And we use these types of scenarios not to give a right or wrong answer, but to help people think through, wow, how would I, if I was a CHW in this scenario, how would I advocate for myself and the importance of my work and my need to not necessarily be in this meeting? Or how would I balance? I do need this information that is being presented in this meeting. I do need to be there. So how can I balance that, what's in this side of my job with and still be effective in the community? And then for those of us who may be supervisors who support CHWs, what would I say to my boss in this situation? And is this all on the CHW, or do I have a role to play in helping both of them meet in the middle and understand why it is important for both, for better balance of both sides, so It's a fun scenario where we ask people to think through what would you do, think about these perspective, things about these, if you were in this situation, what might be helpful, what might create barriers. And so it just creates an opportunity for great discussion, feedback, and folks bouncing off one another. And then in the case that they actually run into a scenario similar to this, it's not their first time. It's like, wait, this is similar to what we discussed in class. We discussed some best practices and some opportunities for better communication or better balancing of our roles and responsibilities. So the next one here is tension in teamwork, workplace communication and conflict resolution. And so you have a CHW, and you have a supervisor. And so the supervisor is saying, if you don't improve your ability to communicate professionally with the rest of the team, you may lose your job. And then in this scenario, the CHW has been what is it? What's the word I'm looking for, Quisha, where there's another staff member who has reported, the CHW has been reported for some conduct that a nurse felt was unprofessional, not with the patient, right? The CHW has a fantastic reputation with clients and patients, but some of their work colleagues feel like the CHW doesn't communicate as professionally with them. And so the CHW is someone who is having a hard time with the EMR, and the nurse is, gets upset every time the CHW makes a mistake in the EMR system, and so there's tension here. And it's like, okay, how does the CHW respond to what the supervisor is saying? How does the supervisor receive what the CHW is saying about their challenges, what they're facing, and why they are frustrated, and then help the nurse to understand what's going on with the CHW, and then, communication, good old fashioned communication can really break down conflict and barriers and help people to really see each other as human beings and understand that, hey, we're all human, we make mistakes, we all have different learning curves, some people need more support than others. What can we do to rectify the situation? Because this is a really good CHW. They're really good with our patients and clients, but we have to just work on our communication as a team, right? So these are just some really fun scenarios to share with you all. If you have thoughts about this or anything, we'd love to hear. Love to see you share. Quisha, I do see some comments, or a comment has come on. Someone says that is sometimes because we are able to communicate with empathy. Absolutely. And
I
as
think I don't
CHWs,
know if this CHW is communicating with empathy though. I can't remember the scenario. I know it comes from our professional skills and conduct, but the comment that I wanted to make, and I actually put it in the chat, is that the way that we deliver this is going to be different for the mode. So for organizations where we're developing e-learning courses, then we will set it up similar as what you're looking at now, and then we may have multiple choices where they pick the scenarios. When we do this in class, especially in a live cohort, then we're actually having them role play and then coming together in a group discussion and talking about that. But I think the best thing, and you can see the source of where these scenarios came from there on the screen, but I think it's best when we use scenarios like this, because again, going back to that real world those exercises, these are things that CHWs are going to be coming up against and coming up across. As a registered nurse that worked with CHWs, before I really knew what a CHW was and did and contributed, sometimes you don't understand what they're there for, and why they're do certain things or don't do certain things. And so these are really helpful for allowing the community health worker to be able to see themselves in that particular position. Surprisingly, a lot of CHWs have already been through this if they've been working as a CHW sometime. But for those that have not, it is eye-opening for them. Cynthia says, as a CHW, we have to use active listening skill in order to provide better communication service to our community. Absolutely, absolutely. So just a couple
100%.
of examples of how we use scenarios and case studies inside of our training curriculum.
Yes, and I love this. I love the comments because I see words like empathy and active listening, and it's so much of what we know to be true of really good community health workers. They practice, they have these certain qualities about them, and they are good communicators, and they do listen well, and they listen actively. So I love seeing that. That excites me. So, innovative training techniques. When it comes to innovative training techniques, you can't go wrong. if the technique involves keeping the learner engaged. So engagement is one of the most critical factors in CHW training. The more integrative and dynamic the training, the more CHWs will retain and apply the knowledge in real world settings. So one effective technique is peer learning and the mentorship programs. CHWs thrive when they can learn from and support one another. Establishing structured peer mentoring allows experienced CHWs to guide newcomers, and so reinforcing their own skills while building a collaborative learning environment. And so next is gamification and interactive activities. And so this could be as simple as using quizzes or point-based challenges, group competitions to keep participants engaged. Research has shown that gamified learning leads to higher motivation and retention rates. Virtual and hybrid training models are becoming more important, especially for organizations working across different geographic locations. So hybrid models allow CHWs to complete self-paced modules online while still engaging in live instructor-led discussions. And so, Quisha, did you want to add anything here to that virtual and hybrid training model?
Yeah, so again, that's something that we do at Remember Health Academy. I actually have a question too. Don't let me forget. I have a question. Yes, so when we talk about the hybrid model, what we do is we have a combination of like self-paced on-demand content that they are consuming. So videos, we've got quizzes, we've got what we call supplemental material, handouts, downloadables. Sometimes we'll put YouTube videos, different things like that. Of course, we've got talking head videos with our content and our instructors that are speaking over those. And they do that on their own. But then during the hybrid model, we actually come together once a week and we have those live sessions where they get to interact and role play and discuss different scenarios and, talk about whatever that week we're talking about for that particular module. When we talk about virtual, that's what I'm talking about, mostly that 100% self-paced on demand. And you have to be really creative. So when I decided that I wanted to do just like 100% self-paced on demand, I was like, well, how am I going to get people to do their skills checks? And how are we going to do the role play and all of this? And so we embedded videos that come from, I actually have the third edition now, but a lot of our curriculum is built off of the Foundations for Community Health Workers second edition. I'll find that link and put it in there for you. But they have a YouTube channel that has a plethora of videos that are already like they're mock videos where you have a demonstration of the correct way that a CHW will interact with someone. You have a demonstration of the incorrect way. And so we use a lot of those. We call them skills checks, where even though we're not meeting every week to go over these things, you're watching this demonstration of a CHW that's providing health education, telling somebody, you need to eat brown rice. White rice is not good for you, right? And this is a person of Asian descent where rice is very much a staple of their diet. And then in the next video, a CHW applying more culturally competent, culturally relevant nutrition education to that individual. And so being able to show those videos and then ask the CHW questions, what went wrong in this scenario? As a CHW, what should have happened? What would you have done? We have found that to work very well, and still being able to, for the CHW, be able to grasp certain principles that they would not have been. Yeah, of course you can use that. That's why we're sharing the resource with you. I'll put it in the chat so you're aware of it. But yes, after you wrap up the last few, I do want to ask a question of the crowd that is here today.
Okay, well, I love what's already happening within the Zoom crowd in the chat. So Dr. Silva said Zoom has easy pop quizzes and poll tools to keep learners engaged. And then Tiffany said Kahoot is great for adult gaming and assessing skills. So yes, we do both. We use
Well,
Zoom.
now, you know what? Now let me just ask my question. Because my question is what I wanted to ask was what platforms are you all using for your training? Like we use a learning management system that comes with, assessments and quizzes and all the things like that. But I know that some people just have Zoom, right? So I would love to know if you would use the chat while we finish up this slide. What types of tools are you using for your learners? What types of platforms are you using to teach your CHWs? Okay.
So while you all are in the chat typing away, hopefully letting us know these awesome tools you're using, I'm going to go ahead and jump into micro learning and on-demand training. So this is another strategy that improves retention. Instead of the long training sessions, we break the content into smaller, more easily digestible segments, which allows our CHWs to learn at their own pace and revisit materials as needed. And then finally, technology and digital tools can revolutionize CHW training. So utilizing mobile apps, online simulations, e-learning platforms. It makes training more accessible, more interactive, especially for CHWs working in remote and underserved areas. So by integrating these innovative training techniques and these organizations can create more effective, engaging, and scalable CHW programs that prepare CHWs for success in the field. So let's see. There's some couple things added to the chat here. Oh, Edley. We're using Edley as our platform for learners. I'm not familiar with that. Is it it sounds educational, Edley. Tamika, would you like to let us know what Edley is?
Or
And while we wait to see if Tamika can
even if you
respond,
drop the link, that
Felicia,
would be
you've put a
great.
YouTube
When
video
you
in the
get
chat.
healthy, I think I'm familiar with that. I want to say that's dietitian based, maybe. It's real. Uh, I know a lot of dietitians use it. The platform has Zoom included. I'm glad you said that because even we use Zenler, Zenler, but the Zoom is included. So even though we look like we're in Zoom, but we're actually filtered through our Zenler platform. Menti.com is similar to Kahoot. I think we use Menti for our live
Yes, we've
presentations.
done Menti. Yes.
Let's see, Edley, Tiffany said Mighty Networks is the platform that we'll be using. I know a lot of organizations use that for kind of membership-based platforms, which is great. You can get it all in one, like the tool that we use that has a community with it, kind of like that Facebook thread. And Mighty Networks works very much the same.
So, Quisha, I see that you linked in a training guide earlier in a YouTube video. Did you have anything to add about those
YouTube channel,
resources?
yeah. So it's the training guide for the Foundation for Community Health Workers textbook, and then also linked in the channel where you can find those videos that we use in our training as well. And then Gwen says, Get Healthy is for multiple practitioners, but it's HIPAA compliant, so I can use it for everything I do. Excellent, excellent, excellent. And Edley is what we use for self-paced programs through Baylor Scott Whitehill. I'm going to check that. I've never heard of Edley, but I'm always looking to learn more about the different platforms. So great. And they all have a common, depending on the platform is going to depend on the bells and whistles that you get. The more bells and whistles like gamification and interactivity, the more it's going to cost. So you have to be very strategic with what exactly you need and you don't need. And if you're an organization that's just getting started, you don't have to have all the bells and whistles, right? You can start off with Zoom, but you still want to be creative. You still want to employ at least those best practices that we've talked about and some of the things that we've shared kind of offline in between the slides. There you go.
Okay. So we'd like to give you one more tip when it comes to CHW training, and the tip is to take your learners on a learning journey. So at Amemba Health Academy, we utilize the 4E learning roadmap, and it's based on brain science and a great way for adult learners to retain information. So the 4E framework begins with engaging the heart. So this is when you connect your learners to the training content, objectives, one another, and themselves. So I'm gonna say it again. You connect them to the training content and objectives, but you connect them to the other learners and you connect them to themselves. So you make them feel welcomed and oriented to one another, to your classroom environment and the overall environment and space. Adult learners must know WIIFM. What's in it for me? And so engaging the heart helps our adult learners to build rapport and trust between one another and the instructor. And it ensures that they are primed to learn. So there are many ways to engage the heart. At Amemba Health, we use icebreakers, dynamicas, and networking activities at the beginning of each training. So we do not start a training without doing this part, because it's very important as we go into each module or each new content area. And so then we want to move into educating the head. That's step 2. And this is it's facilitating interactive, multi-sensory, multi-directional, relevant, fun, learning that meets the training objectives so that learners begin to understand the content. And so consider delivering the training in a non-traditional way to create better engagement. So provide dynamic delivery of educational content. This is where the bulk of the learning should occur. We want to exercise the hands. So we want to provide opportunities so that they can apply the learning concepts in individual or group exercises and activities. This step supports participants as they try, apply, practice, build that muscle memory, and personalize the lessons so that they can use them outside of the training. And so this hands-on is vital to equip learners to use the lessons independently. And so it's especially important that we teach behaviors, skills, processes, mindsets, etc., not merely knowledge. And lastly, we want them to exit into the environment. We want the last step is so that your learners um, they plan or demonstrate how they will adapt and apply the lessons that they learned to achieve the intended results. And so this final step includes action plans, it includes commitments, it includes accountability, increasing the odds that the learners will use the lessons outside of the trainings. So you may utilize what we call the real world homework assignments at a member health. And I know we talked about this a little bit a couple slides ago, Quisha, but if there's anything else you'd like to add to how you use this learner roadmap and encourage your CHWs to exit into the real world and become and ready to apply what they've learned, then I'd love to hold space for you.
Yeah, I would just say that we do this not only virtually, but we do this in our live trainings too, whenever we go to do workshops. And so this four-step approach can be used whether you're creating an online course that they're going to go through, asynchronously, whether it's live, whether it's in person. And it's worked for us. It's been very successful in the years that we've been training CHWs. It's based on brain science. I do not own it. I did brand it with our little acronym there. And you're all going to get a copy of this. You're actually going to get a copy of our implementation guide that's going to include the steps of the 4 e-learning roadmap as JR just described, as well as some other information that we use. It is the entire implementation guide for our CHW curriculum, and that's going to go out in your email as well. So that's all I have to share on that. Any questions? If there's any questions about it, if you've tried something similar and gotten great results, or if you try something else when it comes to CHW training, I'd love to know that as well. And certainly if we have time, we'd love to know what best practices or innovation has been successful for your organization as well.